My name is Faye Gower-Smith. I'm the Principal Occupational Therapist for Norfolk County Council, and I'm a member of the Armed Forces Covenant. So I'm here today to talk about the Armed Forces Covenant, what it's about, and how you can be thinking about it with people that are attending your services. What we're trying to do is think about finding veterans in the care system. So if I can just go on to the next slide, please. So I'm just going to explain a little bit about the Armed Forces Covenant. Hopefully get you some understanding of what the Norfolk Armed Forces community is all about, and encouraging you to identify any veterans that may be attending your services. So if I can go to the next slide, please. So what is the Armed Forces Covenant? So basically it's a promise that we will treat people fairly. We will recognise the sacrifice that people have made in their contribution to working for the services for our freedoms and putting their lives at risks. And it helps us think about giving consideration to those people who have been wounded, injured or sick or bereaved as a result of serving our country. And it's about us having a duty or a due regard to make sure that health, housing and education providers in local authorities and public sectors consider any impact of any changes to any services on the armed forces community. So there's a pledge that we sign up to being an Armed Forces Covenant supporter. So if I just go on to the next slide. So just a little bit about our community. So we've got quite a big community in Norfolk. As you know, we've got Stanton, which is the training ground in Norfolk. We have over 40,000 veterans living on operational bases at Robertson's and RAF Marmon. We've got around 2,000 people, and then an additional 80,000 people using Stanton, which is the big training ground by Thetford. And as a result of those armed forces communities, we've got around 1,500 children attending school, and then obviously we've got all the spouses and partners from the Covenant, Armed Forces Covenant. So it's a big group of people in Norfolk, and a lot of people also end up settling in Norfolk following their lives in the services and when they leave the services. So if I can just go on to the next slide, please. So just a little bit about, some people may have served themselves, some people may not have, people may have experience of family members, but there is a significant difference between military life and civilian life, as we may and could imagine. Obviously housing is a very different element. So housing, when you're living on the barracks, you're renting a house, it's not your house. Some members of the armed forces are moving around a lot, so families are being moved and lifted and moved around a lot, and it can have a huge impact. That's also related to people's health, so often they will have health needs being met by one organisation, and then they have to move because their partner or person in the armed forces move. And then also just thinking about employment and the impact on employment and supporting those people as they come out of it, but their family members, often the impact of employment is quite significant because that person who is in the armed forces may suddenly have to move. So there's a lot of difference between the people that are in the armed forces and the impact on those families and those networks around them. So if I can go to the next slide, please. So I won't go on too much about this, but also just thinking about social isolation and just thinking about obviously yourselves as day services providers. You may have some people that you may not know that they have served in the armed forces, and one of the reasons for us coming and talking to you today is just for you maybe to start thinking about some conversations that you might ask people. We've been doing some work with the Armed Forces Covenant where we've been going into some supported housing providers and organising coffee mornings, and we've had people come out that had never really come out of their rooms and spoken about their armed forces journey and what they had done. And when we talk about someone who's been in the armed forces, it could be a day, but it could also be their lifetime working in the armed forces. So when we think about anyone and what might be available to support people that have been in the armed forces, as I said, it could be someone that's even was only in for a day, they would still be eligible to access support from our services. But there is a real significant difference between veterans and our civilians and things that they have seen, and it's really important for us to think about that and then think about what services are out there to support them, and how we can do that. So we have some different Operation Courage, where it's around supporting people with mental health issues, and it's fast-tracked mental health services a lot faster than a community, and Op Restore as well. And then we also have Operation Ascend, which is supporting people into employment. So if we can just go to the next slide, please. So what we're trying to do, and by talking to you today, is to try and think about where we can identify those veterans that are in our care sector, to try and help reduce any loneliness, isolation, making sure that we're signposting them to support that might be available. As I said, we did a pilot with the Royal British Legion Cossey branch, where we went into some supported living and organised a coffee morning, and it was really well attended, and really well engaged, and even family members were invited as well. But we had people that, as I said, hadn't come out, made any connections, hadn't necessarily talked about it, but actually what we started to form was some friendships, started to sort of get questions being asked, and we identified that we need to think about how we can work with the different sectors in getting staff, your employees, more informed about how to identify. As an occupational therapist by professional background, when I'm going into someone's home to do an assessment, there's often sort of pictures or something that might instigate that kind of conversation to ask them, have you served, which is slightly more difficult for yourselves in your day services settings, but there might be a badge that they're wearing, or it might be something that can indicate a conversation around have you served, and then thinking about what other services might be available for them. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So what we're trying to do, as I said, is raise awareness sessions around promoting the knowledge of the Armed Forces Board, and this slide deck will come out to you, and there's links to the Armed Forces Covenant Board and the different things that are available. We're getting out and speaking to lots of different services. We're engaging with care providers to look at signing up with the veteran-friendly framework that's organised by the Royal Star and Garter. There's a lot of work going on with GP surgeries to sign up to the Armed Forces Pledge, so that we are supporting our Armed Forces veterans. Next slide, please. So this little bit is just about, the questions that we can ask around have you served in the Armed Forces. So it's just getting that understanding and think about how you can ask those questions, and then just also how you can signpost to local charities and agencies. And as I said, there is a link that will come out with this around the Armed Forces, all the different charities that are available for the Royal British Legion, all the different charities that are there that might be able to provide support to people on a range of things around social isolation. It might be that they can fund mobility equipment, they might be able to fund adaptations, lots of things that they can be doing. So it's really important that we are identifying those veterans and getting them to the right support that's available, and the charity support that's available to them. So that's a very, very quick whistle-stop tour, and unfortunately Mary Halliday and Bev, who are our Armed Forces Covenant leads, couldn't make the meeting today, so I was asked to attend, and I don't give it the justice that they do, because actually there is so much work that goes on and there is so much available, and the presentation has got an email, so if you have got any questions, I really would encourage you to send anything through, which is on that page there, the Armed Forces Covenant Board at Norfolk. If you've got any further questions, if you'd like any further information, they are very open to coming and talking further around how to support you to ask those questions, so that we can just identify our veterans and then make sure that we're giving them the access to the right services and support that they need. So that was very quick. Is there any questions for me at all?